The Arizona Territory, 1871. Stefanie Moss had learned to read the desert like others read books. 3 years wandering its unforgiving expanse had taught her that survival depended on seeing what others missed. The distant dust cloud moving too purposefully against the wind, the unusual silence where coyotes should be calling, the feeling, that nameless dread crawling up her spine, telling her something was wrong. "Mr. Wagner," she called softly, not taking her eyes off the horizon. "I think we should change course." The wagon master didn't bother looking back at her. "Miss Moss, we've been over this. The Butterfield route is the only way through this stretch." Stefanie's fingers tightened around the worn leather of her satchel, the only possession that had followed her through 12 homes in 23 years. "There's movement to the west," she persisted. "Not Apache. The dust is too heavy." This time Wagner turned, his weathered face creased with impatience. "Girl, I've been crossing this territory since before you were born. I don't need advice from a—" He never finished his sentence. The first shot cracked through the hot air like thunder, and Wagner's chest bloomed red before he toppled from his horse. "Ambush!" someone screamed, and chaos erupted. Stefanie didn't think. She reacted. Sliding from her horse, she crawled beneath the nearest wagon as bullets splintered wood above her head. Not Indians. Indians didn't waste ammunition like this. These were white men, bandits most likely, shooting with reckless abandon. Through the chaos she caught glimpses, Mrs. Everly clutching her baby, Mr. Dawson firing blindly toward the ridge, young Tommy Parker running for cover before a bullet caught him mid-stride. The family that had reluctantly agreed to let her join their wagon train to Tucson was being slaughtered. Another family gone. Another place she didn't belong. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Horses approached. Not the careful advance of cautious men, but the confident stride of those who knew they'd won. Stefanie pressed herself deeper into the shadow of the wagon, holding her breath. "Check for valuables," a gruff voice commanded. "Anything worth taking?" "What about survivors?" another asked. A pause. "No witnesses." Cold fear gripped Stefanie's heart. She'd survived abandonment, hunger, and the cruelty of those who had taken her in only for the labor she could provide. She would not die here, forgotten in the dust. Boots crunched closer. A shadow fell across the ground near her hiding place. "Well, what do we have here?" The voice was closer now, amused and dangerous. Stefanie's hand closed around a rock. She wouldn't go without a fight. But before the bandit could bend down to look under the wagon, something whistled through the air. The man made a strange gurgling sound, and Stefanie saw the feathered end of an arrow protruding from his throat before he collapsed. More arrows followed, silent and deadly. Shouts of alarm. Gunfire. Then, running. The bandits were fleeing, their horses' hooves thundering away. Stefanie remained frozen, barely breathing. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the violence that had preceded it. She knew what arrows meant in this territory. Apache. Minutes passed. The sun beat down mercilessly. She could smell blood baking into the sand. Then footsteps, lighter than the bandits', deliberate and unhurried. A shadow fell across her again. Stefanie looked up into the darkest eyes she had ever seen, set in a face the color of the earth itself. The Apache warrior regarded her without expression, his obsidian gaze revealing nothing of his intentions. For a long moment, neither moved. Then, with unexpected gentleness, he extended his hand. Stefanie hesitated. Death by bandits or death by Apache? Was there a difference? Yet something in those eyes held neither cruelty nor hatred, only a quiet waiting. She made her choice and placed her trembling hand in his. The warrior pulled her from beneath the wagon in one fluid motion. Standing before him, Stefanie realized he was not much taller than she was, though his presence seemed to fill the space around them. His hair hung in 2 braids, framing a face marked with lines of experience rather than age. A face that had seen too much. "The others?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. He shook his head once. Stefanie looked around at the carnage, another place that had rejected her, another group of people she had failed to belong to. "What will you do with me?" The warrior studied her for a moment, then spoke in surprisingly clear English. "My name is Makya. You come with me now." It wasn't a question. Stefanie glanced at the empty desert stretching in all directions, the certainty of death if she fled. then back to the warrior's unwavering gaze. "Do I have a choice?" she asked. The corners of Makya's mouth tightened in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Always choice, die here or live, choose here or—" As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Stefanie Moss mounted behind Makya on his paint horse, leaving behind the blood-soaked sand and the bodies of yet another family that was not hers. The desert wind whipped her hair as they rode toward the shadowed mountains, toward uncertainty, but also perhaps toward survival. She had chosen to live. Again. Stefanie had expected to be taken to an Apache camp immediately. Instead, Makya led them deep into the mountains, following trails invisible to her eyes. They traveled through the night, stopping only when his horse needed rest. He offered her water from a skin, but spoke little. By dawn, they had reached a small canyon. A stream trickled between rocks, and the walls provided shelter from both sun and eyes that might be watching. Only then did Makya dismount and help her down. "Rest," he said simply, gesturing to a flat rock in the shade. Stefanie sank down gratefully, her legs trembling from the long ride. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. Makya was unsaddling his horse. He paused, looking at her over the animal's back. "Safe place. Not camp. Not yet. Why did you save me?" The question had burned in her mind through the silent hours of riding. He didn't answer immediately, finishing with the horse before coming to sit a respectful distance from her. "Why were you with those people?" he countered. The unexpected question caught her off guard. They allowed me to travel with them. I paid what I could." "Not family?" "No." The word came out harder than she intended. "I have no family." Something flickered in Makya's eyes, recognition perhaps. "The white eyes only took you because you paid." Stefanie looked away, unwilling to admit how accurate his assessment was. The Parkers had made it clear that her presence was tolerated only because of the money she had saved from 3 years of washing laundry in Prescott. "Why did you save me?" she asked again. Makya's gaze traveled to the horizon. "I watched. 3 days. Saw bandits following, went for help." His jaw tightened. "Came back too late. But why take me? Why not just leave me?" He looked at her then, his dark eyes holding hers. "Your eyes. My eyes. Like deer caught in trap. Fighting still. Not giving up." He pointed to his chest. "I know this fighting." Stefanie felt exposed suddenly, as if this stranger had peered into places she kept hidden from everyone. She changed the subject. "You speak English well." A shadow passed over Makya's face. "Mission school. 3 years." He said nothing more, but his expression told her those years held memories he did not welcome. They rested through the day, and Stefanie slept fitfully, exhaustion finally overcoming her wariness. When she woke, Makya was cooking a small rabbit over a nearly smokeless fire. He offered her a portion without a word. The meat was unseasoned but tender. She ate hungrily, realizing she hadn't had food since before the attack. "Thank you," she said when she had finished. Makya nodded once, then gestured to her torn dress. "Need better clothes. For mountains." It was only then that Stefanie realized he intended to take her deeper into Apache territory. Fear surged through her. "The army, they'll look for me. When they find the wagons—" "Army will think Apache killed all," Makya said flatly. "Always blame Apache. But I can't just go with you to your people." The stories she had heard about Apache captives flooded her mind. Tales whispered around campfires about torture and worse. Makya regarded her steadily. "What is waiting for you with white eyes? Another wagon, another family that takes your money, not you." His words struck with uncomfortable precision. "Care Apache not what white stories say. You see, then decide." That night they rode again, climbing higher into the mountains. Stefanie found herself studying Makya's back as he guided the horse along treacherous paths. There was a dignity in his posture, a certainty in his movements that she had rarely seen in anyone. Near dawn they stopped at a hidden spring. As Stefanie washed her face in the cold water, she caught her reflection. Pale skin smudged with dust, blonde hair tangled from the wind, eyes haunted by too many losses. She hardly recognized herself. "They call you what name?" Makya asked, suddenly beside her. "Stefanie," she answered. "Stefanie Moss." He repeated it carefully, respecting the sounds. "I am Makya. It means hunter in your tongue." It was the first personal information he had volunteered. Stefanie nodded, uncertain how to respond. "Tomorrow we reach my people," he said. "You will stay in my mother's wickiup. She has no daughters now." The implication of now hung in the air between them. Stefanie wanted to ask what had happened, but held her tongue. As if reading her thoughts, Makya continued, his voice low and controlled. 6 winters passed. Army came to our camp while men were hunting. Said we stole cattle. His hands clenched. We had no cattle. They knew this. Stefanie felt a chill despite the warm night. What happened? My sisters. My mother's sisters. My cousin's wife with baby. He looked away. All gone. Only my mother lived, hidden under bodies. Horror washed over Stefanie. She had heard of such atrocities, but had tried to believe they were exaggerations. "I'm sorry," she whispered, knowing the words were inadequate. Makya's eyes found hers again. "Your people did this, but you—" He paused, studying her face. "You are not your people. Like I am not bandit who kills wagons." He stood, ending the conversation. "Sleep now, tomorrow is long journey." Stefanie lay awake long after Makya had settled into his blanket across the small clearing. His words echoed in her mind. "You are not your people." The truth was, she had never been anyone's people. Orphaned at 8 when influenza took her parents, she had been passed from reluctant relative to church charity to working household, never staying long enough to put down roots. Always the outsider, always temporary. As sleep finally claimed her, Stefanie wondered what it would be like to belong somewhere, anywhere, at all. Dawn found them moving again, climbing higher into mountains that seemed to touch the sky. By midday, Makya had become alert, scanning their surroundings with increased vigilance. "We are near Apache land now," he explained. "Scouts watch all approaches." Sure enough, they had traveled less than an hour more when 2 warriors appeared suddenly on the trail ahead, materializing from the rocks as if born from the mountain itself. They exchanged rapid words with Makya in their language, voices tense, gestures sharp. One of the warriors pointed at Stefanie, his expression hostile. Makya responded calmly but firmly, his hand raised in what appeared to be a gesture of responsibility. After a tense moment, the warriors nodded reluctantly and melted back into the landscape. "What did they say?" Stefanie asked when they were alone again. "They ask why I bring white woman, say you bring trouble." Makya's expression was unreadable. "I say you are under my protection, my responsibility." And they accepted that? For now. He urged the horse forward. "Come, camp is close." They crested a ridge, and suddenly the Apache camp spread before them, a collection of dome-shaped dwellings nestled in a protected valley. Women moved between structures, children played near a stream that cut through the center, and smoke rose from cooking fires. It looked nothing like the fearsome stronghold Stefanie had imagined. It looked like a home. As they descended toward the camp, Makya spoke quietly. "Do not show fear. Walk with dignity. My people respect strength." Stefanie straightened her back, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Will they accept me?" Makya's eyes held hers for a moment. "Time will tell. But remember, you are not prisoner here. You are guest under my protection." He paused. "And Stefanie Moss?" "Yes? Here. No one will take your money to let you exist." With those words, he led her into the Apache camp, and into a world unlike any she had known before. The first week in the Apache camp passed in a blur of strange sights, sounds, and customs. As promised, Stefanie was given space in the wickiup belonging to Makya's mother, Naltsai, a small, severe woman whose face bore the deep lines of suffering endured with dignity. Naltsai neither welcomed nor rejected her. She simply made space, showing Stefanie where to sleep and how to behave with brisk, efficient gestures that required no common language. At night, Stefanie would watch the older woman weaving intricate baskets by firelight, her fingers moving with mesmerizing precision. Makya himself was often absent, hunting or scouting with other warriors. When present, he kept a respectful distance, though Stefanie sometimes caught him watching her with an unreadable expression. The other Apache regarded her with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion. Children stared openly before being hushed by their mothers. Women observed her clumsy attempts at their daily tasks, with expressions ranging from amusement to disdain. Warriors simply looked through her, as if she were invisible. On the 8th day, as Stefanie struggled to grind corn using a stone metate under Naltsai's critical eye, an elderly woman approached, pointing at her and speaking rapidly to Naltsai. Naltsai responded sharply, but the old woman persisted, reaching out to touch Stefanie's hair with gnarled fingers. Uncomfortable, Stefanie remained still, unsure how to respond. "She says your hair is like corn silk," came Makya's voice from behind her. "She has never touched white woman's hair before." Stefanie turned to find him watching the interaction, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "What did your mother say to her?" "That you are not animal in exhibition." He came closer, crouching beside the metate. "You are doing this wrong. You waste strength." Without asking permission, he placed his hands over hers, adjusting her grip on the grinding stone. "Like this. Let weight do work." His hands were calloused but gentle, his proximity sending an unexpected warmth through her arms. Stefanie found herself acutely aware of the earthy scent of him, the controlled power in his movements. "There," he said, releasing her hands. "Better." When she looked up, Naltsai was watching them with narrowed eyes. The old woman had disappeared. That evening, as they sat outside the wiki-up eating a stew of rabbit and wild onions, Makya spoke to his mother in Apache. Though Stefanie couldn't understand the words, the conversation seemed intense. Occasionally, Naltsai's eyes would flick toward her before returning to her son. Finally, Makya turned to Stefanie. "My mother asks how long you stay." The question caught her off guard. I don't know. I hadn't thought about it." "Where would you go?" he asked. The simple question stripped away her defenses. Where indeed? Back to Prescott to wash soldiers' laundry for pennies. To Tucson, where she knew no one. To another wagon train. Another temporary arrangement? "I don't know," she admitted quietly. Makya translated for his mother, who listened impassively before speaking again. "She says you must earn your place," Makya translated. "Learn our ways. Be useful." He hesitated. "She says, you have eyes that have seen too much sorrow for someone so young." Stefanie looked at Naltsai, surprised to find something like recognition in the older woman's gaze. Not warmth exactly, but understanding. "Tell her I will work hard," Stefanie said, "and tell her thank you for allowing me to stay." After Makya translated, Naltsai gave a single dignified nod before returning to her meal. Later that night, unable to sleep, Stefanie slipped outside. The moon hung low over the mountains, bathing the camp in silver light. She found a rock overlooking the valley and sat, drawing her knees to her chest. "Cannot sleep." Makya's voice came softly from the shadows. Stefanie startled. "You move like a ghost." He settled beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. Apache children learn to walk quietly before they learn to run. For a while they sat in silence, watching the moonlight play across the distant peaks. "Your mother," Stefanie finally said. "She doesn't smile much." "No, not since that day." Makya's profile was etched in silver and shadow. "But she is strong, survives. Like you." He turned to look at her. "Like you also, I think." The simple observation touched something deep within her. "I've just done what I had to do. This is what survival is." His voice was low. "But there is difference between surviving and living." "And what's that difference?" Makya gestured toward the sleeping camp below. "Community, purpose, belonging." He looked at her directly. "What is your story, Stefanie Moss? How did you become woman alone?" No one had ever asked about her past with such directness. Strangely, she found herself wanting to answer. "My parents died of fever when I was 8. My father's brother took me in. But his wife resented another mouth to feed." Stefanie stared at her hands. "When I was 12, they sent me to work for a minister's family, then a shopkeeper, then a rancher." Each word released a weight she hadn't known she carried. "Nowhere was home. I was always temporary. And when you became woman, I left, worked where I could, saved every penny." She gave a bitter laugh. "I thought if I could pay my way, people might—" She trailed off. "Accept you as their own," Makya finished. Stefanie nodded, surprised by the sting of tears. "Foolish, wasn't it?" "Not foolish, human." Makya's voice held no judgment. "All people need to belong. Even you, she asked, wiping her eyes quickly. I belong to my people, my land. His hand swept the valley. Even when white soldiers take our hunting grounds, force us to smaller territories. Apache know who we are, where we belong. He turned to her. This is strength white eyes do not understand. The conviction in his voice made her envious. I've never belonged anywhere, she admitted. Not really. Makya studied her face in the moonlight. Perhaps you looked in wrong places. Before she could ask what he meant, he stood. Dawn comes early. You should rest. As he walked away, Stefanie called after him. Why did you really bring me here, Makya? He paused, looking back over his shoulder. Maybe I saw someone who needed place. Same as I would need if our positions were reversed. With that, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving Stefanie alone with a strange new feeling unfurling in her chest, something dangerously close to hope. The days that followed took on a rhythm. Stefanie worked alongside the women, learning their ways. Her hands blistered and bled, then hardened. Naltsai's impatient corrections gradually became less frequent as Stefanie mastered basic tasks. She began to pick up Apache words, simple terms for food, tools, directions. The children, overcoming their initial wariness, took to following her around, giggling when she attempted their language. One little girl, Sonzi, would often bring her small treasures, an unusually shaped stone, a feather, a wildflower, offering them with solemn ceremony before darting away. On the 20th day, as Stefanie hung strips of venison to dry in the sun, Naltsai approached with a bundle of clothing, a dress of soft deerskin decorated with simple beadwork. For you, she said in halting English, the first words she had spoken directly to Stefanie. Your dress, she gestured at Stefanie's tattered calico, no good for mountains. Stunned by both the gift and the words, Stefanie accepted the bundle. Thank you, she said, then carefully added the Apache word Makya had taught her. He. A flicker of surprise crossed Naltsai's face, followed by the smallest nod of approval before she turned away. That evening, wearing the deerskin dress, Stefanie felt different. Less like an intruder, more like something she couldn't quite name. The soft leather moved with her body in a way her stiff cotton dresses never had, as if the very clothing was teaching her a different way to exist in the world. Makya noticed immediately. You look, he began, then seemed to reconsider his words. The dress suits you. Your mother made it for me. Something like satisfaction crossed his features. Good. This is good sign. As summer deepened, Stefanie found herself changing in ways both subtle and profound. Her skin darkened under the sun. Her movements became more economical, more in harmony with the rhythm of the camp. She learned to listen to the mountains, to read the weather in the shape of clouds, to move quietly through the forest. One day, returning from gathering berries with Sonzi, Stefanie found 2 cavalry officers in the center of the camp, surrounded by tense warriors. Her heart froze at the sight of the blue uniforms. Makya stood facing them, his posture rigid but controlled. When he saw her, something flashed across his face. Concern, perhaps, or warning. Too late, Stefanie realized how she must appear. A white woman in Apache dress, a basket of berries on her hip, a native child by her side. The officers stared at her with undisguised shock. Ma'am, one called out, taking a step toward her. Are you being held here against your will? The question hung in the air. Every eye in the camp turned to her. Stefanie felt the weight of those gazes, Naltsai's watchful assessment, Sonse's small hand tightening in hers, and Makya's. Makya's held something she hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. In that moment, Stefanie understood the power she held. A single word from her could bring soldiers down upon this camp. These people who had taken her in, some reluctantly, some with growing acceptance, could be displaced, imprisoned, or worse based on her answer. No, sir, she said clearly, stepping forward. I am here by choice. The officer frowned. Ma'am, if you're under duress... I said I'm here by choice, Stefanie repeated firmly. These people saved my life when bandits attacked the wagon train I was traveling with. They've shown me nothing but kindness. The officers exchanged skeptical glances. The army patrol that found the wagons reported Apache arrows, the senior officer said. The Apache killed the bandits, not the settlers, Stefanie insisted. I witnessed it myself. And you just decided to stay with them? Voluntarily? Disbelief colored his tone. Stefanie lifted her chin. Yes. The junior officer leaned closer to his superior, murmuring something that made both men's expressions harden. Well, ma'am, the senior officer said finally, we'll be making regular patrols in this area. Should you change your mind about your situation, we'll be passing through every fortnight. His implication was clear. He didn't believe her. After the soldiers departed, the camp remained tense. That night, the Council of Elders met longer than usual, their voices occasionally rising in heated debate. Stefanie sat outside Naltsai's wickiup, aware of the sideways glances cast her way. She had defended the Apache, but her very presence had brought the army's attention to their camp. Whatever fragile place she had begun to carve for herself felt suddenly precarious. Makya found her there, his face grave in the firelight. "Walk with me," he said quietly. They moved away from the camp, following a path that led to a small mesa overlooking the valley. Stars crowded the sky above them, so close it seemed they could be plucked like fruit. "The elders wish you to leave," Makya said without preamble. Though she had expected it, the words still cut deeply. "I understand." "I told them no." Stefanie turned to him, surprised. "Why?" Makya's eyes reflected the starlight. "You spoke truth to soldiers, protected my people when you could have gone with them. I couldn't let them think your people attacked the wagons. Many white women would have." They stood in silence, the night air cool around them. "The soldiers will come back," Stefanie said finally. "Because of me." "Yes." Makya's gaze was steady. "But they come anyway. Always have. We move camp if necessary. I don't want to bring trouble to your people, to you. Trouble finds Apache with or without you, Stefanie Moss." His voice softened. "Question is not if soldiers come. Question is, where do you want to be when they do?" The simplicity of his question cut through her defenses. Where did she want to be? For the first time in her life, the answer was clear. "Here," she whispered. "But I don't belong." "Stop!" Makya stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cool night air. "Always you say this. I don't belong. Who told you this lie?" Tears welled in Stefanie's eyes. "Everyone. Always." Without warning, Makya reached out, his fingers gently brushing a tear from her cheek. The unexpected tenderness of the gesture broke something open inside her. "I don't belong anywhere," she cried, the words tearing from a place so deep she hadn't known it existed. Makya's hand cupped her face, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "You belong with me," he said simply. And then he was kissing her, his lips surprisingly soft against hers, his touch reverent yet certain. Stefanie froze for only a moment before responding, her hands finding their way to his shoulders, then his neck, then the silken weight of his braids. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Makya rested his forehead against hers. "Since first day," he murmured, "when I pulled you from under wagon, something in your eyes called to me." Stefanie couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the rush of emotions. All her life she had been unwanted, tolerated at best, rejected at worst. Yet here, in this most unlikely of places, this man looked at her as if she were precious. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Makya's thumb traced the line of her jaw. "We learn together." His eyes searched hers. "If you want." In answer, Stefanie rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his again, pouring into the kiss all the words she didn't know how to say. "Yes, I want. I choose this. I choose you." Under the vast Arizona sky, with the mountains standing witness, Stefanie Moss, orphan, outsider, wanderer, finally found something she had stopped believing existed, a place where she belonged. News traveled fast in the Arizona territory. By the time autumn painted the cottonwoods gold along the riverbanks, word had spread that a white woman was living willingly among the Apache, not as a captive, but as one of them. Each patrol that passed through the area confirmed the strange tale. Stefanie Moss moved freely among the savages, spoke their language, and refused all offers to rescue her. Worse, according to whispers in Tucson saloons, she had taken up with one of the warriors, a man called Makya, who was known to the army as a skilled fighter who had thus far eluded capture or surrender. For Major Harold Blackwood, recently assigned to Fort Bowie with orders to subdue the remaining hostile Apache bands. The situation was intolerable. A white woman consorting with Indians undermined everything the territorial authorities were trying to establish, the natural order of things, the clear boundaries between civilization and savagery. "She's either been corrupted or coerced," he declared to his officers over dinner. "Either way, she cannot be permitted to remain among them." It sets a dangerous precedent. Lieutenant James Collins, who had seen Stefanie on a patrol, cleared his throat. "Sir, she seemed quite adamant about staying of her own free will." Blackwood's fork clattered against his plate. "No white woman in her right mind would choose such a life, Lieutenant. She's clearly been," he glanced at the other officers, "interfered with. Her judgment is compromised." "What do you propose, sir?" asked Captain Reed. Blackwood dabbed his mouth with a napkin. "We'll organize a proper extraction, for her own good." As the officers discussed strategy, none noticed the young Apache man serving as a kitchen worker slipping away to saddle a horse. In the Apache camp, preparations for winter were underway. Women preserved food and repaired wickiups, while men brought in game from increasingly distant hunting grounds. Resources were scarce. The army had pushed them higher into the mountains, away from the richest hunting territories. Stefanie worked alongside Naltsai, who had gradually become, if not warm, then at least accepting of her presence. The older woman had even begun teaching her traditional medicine, which plants healed wounds, which eased pain, which brought down fevers. "You have good hands," Naltsai said one afternoon, as Stefanie carefully crushed juniper berries. "Gentle but strong." Coming from Makya's mother, this was high praise. Stefanie smiled. "I had a good teacher." Something close to approval flickered in Naltsai's eyes before she turned back to her work. Later, as twilight gathered, Stefanie stood at the edge of camp, watching for Makya's return from a hunting expedition. 3 days he had been gone, the longest they had been separated since that night on the mesa, when everything had changed. The past 2 months had been the happiest of Stefanie's life. Though some in the tribe still regarded her with suspicion, others had begun to accept her, particularly after she had helped deliver Tashin's baby during a difficult birth. Her knowledge of white medicine, combined with what Naltsai had taught her, had saved both mother and child, and Makya looked at her as if she were the sunrise after the longest night. Their relationship had developed slowly, respectfully, in the Apache way. They had not yet become husband and wife. Such a union required time and consideration, Makya had explained, but the intention was understood. They belonged to each other. A movement on the ridge caught her attention. A single rider, coming fast, too fast for safety on the mountain trails, not the returning hunters. As the rider drew closer, Stefanie recognized Keme, a young man who occasionally worked at the fort for intelligence. His horse was lathered with sweat, its sides heaving as he pulled it to a stop before the gathered elders. His news, delivered in rapid Apache, caused immediate alarm. Women began gathering children, men reached for weapons, and the elders convened in urgent discussion. "What's happening?" Stefanie asked Naltsai, who had emerged from their wickiup. The older woman's face was grim. "Soldiers coming, many soldiers. Coming for you." Cold fear gripped Stefanie's heart. "For me? Why?" "To take you back." Naltsai's eyes were hard. "They say you are," she searched for the English word, "prisoner here. Say, Apache, force you to stay." "That's a lie," Stefanie protested. "I've told them repeatedly I'm here by choice." "White men hear only what they want to hear." Naltsai began gathering essentials. "We move camp, now." "But Makya, the hunters, they don't know." "Scouts will find them. Tell them to meet at winter grounds." Naltsai thrust a bundle into Stefanie's arms. "Pack only what you need." As the camp dissolved into urgent activity, guilt washed over Stefanie. Her presence had brought this danger to people who had taken her in, taught her, accepted her, people who had become her family in all the ways that mattered. A sudden resolve crystallized within her. "I should go to the soldiers," she said. "Explain again. Make them understand." Naltsai grabbed her arm with surprising strength. "No. They take you. Maybe kill us. You stay with people." "This is because of me," Stefanie insisted. "I can't let everyone suffer." "You are one of us now," Naltsai said fiercely. "We protect our own." The words struck Stefanie like a physical blow. One of us, our own. After a lifetime of being nobodies, she was now somebody's. She belonged. Within an hour, the camp had vanished, leaving only cold fire pits and trampled earth. The tribe moved like shadows through the mountains, following ancient paths known only to them. Children were carried in silence, possessions strapped to travois pulled by the few horses they owned. Stefanie stayed close to Naltsai, helping the older woman navigate the difficult terrain. Though she had learned much about moving quietly through the wilderness, she knew she would never match the Apache's ability to disappear into the landscape. As night fell, they made a cold camp in a sheltered canyon. No fires were lit. Children huddled against their mothers, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. Sentries were posted on the ridges above. "Will we reach the winter grounds tomorrow?" Stefanie asked Naltsai softly. 2 days, maybe 3. The older woman's face was lined with worry. "If soldiers follow—" "They won't," a familiar voice said from the darkness. Stefanie turned, her heart leaping. "Makya!" He emerged from the shadows, his hunting party behind him. They had clearly pushed themselves hard to catch up, their faces drawn with exhaustion. Stefanie rushed to him, propriety forgotten in her relief. Makya caught her in his arms, holding her tightly for a moment before setting her back, his eyes scanning her face. "You are safe," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We all are, for now." She touched his face, reassuring herself of his presence. "But the soldiers—" "I know. Kams found us on the trail." Makya's expression hardened. "We saw the soldiers. Many, as he said. They will reach our camp by morning." "And find it empty," one of the elders said, joining them. "But they will follow." "No," Makya said with quiet certainty. "They will not." Something in his tone made Stefanie's blood run cold. "What did you do? What was necessary?" Makya's eyes held hers steadily. "We crossed our trail with that of a Navajo hunting party heading north. The soldiers will follow the wrong tracks for many days before they realize their mistake." Relief washed through Stefanie, followed immediately by concern. "The Navajo, will they be in danger?" A ghost of a smile touched Makya's lips. "The Navajo know these mountains as well as we do. Better, perhaps, and they have no love for bluecoats." He squeezed her hand. "Do not worry for them." The elder nodded approval. "Good. We continue at first light." As the others settled for the night, Makya led Stefanie to a secluded spot beneath an overhang of rock. They sat close, sharing warmth and the comfort of each other's presence. "I was afraid," Stefanie admitted, her voice barely audible, "that you wouldn't find us, that the soldiers would—" "Shh!" Makya's arm tightened around her. "I will always find you. This is my fault. They're coming because of me." Makya turned to her, his face serious in the moonlight. "No. They come because they cannot accept that white woman chooses Apache over them. It wounds their pride. Major Blackwood will not give up easily," Stefanie said, remembering the stern officer from his visits to the camp. "He believes he's saving me." "From what?" There was a hint of amusement in Makya's voice now. "From happiness?" Despite the gravity of their situation, Stefanie found herself smiling. "From the terrible fate of being loved by you, I suppose." Makya's expression softened. He reached out, tracing the curve of her cheek with gentle fingers. Terrible fate indeed. His kiss was tender, a promise in the darkness. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "We reach winter grounds. We will be safe there. And then? Then we live. Together." He took her hands in his. "I would make you my wife, Stefanie Moss, if you will have me." Joy bloomed in her chest, bright and fierce. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." For a moment, surrounded by danger and uncertainty, they allowed themselves to imagine a future, one where they could simply be together, without the world trying to tear them apart. Morning came too soon. The tribe moved out as the first light touched the eastern peaks, staying high where the terrain was rougher, but where they were less likely to be spotted. Makya led the way, with scouts ranging ahead and to the sides. By midday they had covered significant ground, but Stefanie could see the toll the pace was taking on the elderly and the children. She worked her way forward to where Makya walked. "We need to rest," she said quietly. "Some of the children are struggling." Makya's eyes scanned the horizon. "Soon, there is a place ahead with water." An hour later, they reached a small spring nestled among boulders. The tribe gratefully stopped to drink and rest aching limbs. Stefanie helped distribute dried meat and pine nuts, making sure the youngest and oldest ate first. As she knelt beside a young mother with twin infants, a distant sound caught her attention, the faint but unmistakable echo of a bugle call. Her eyes met Makya's across the clearing. He had heard it too. "They found our trail," one of the warriors said, his voice tight with anger. "Impossible," another argued. "We covered our tracks." Makya raised his hand for silence, listening intently. "They are to the west, following the ridgeline." His expression darkened. "Someone is guiding them." Murmurs spread through the group. A guide who knew these mountains could only be Apache, or someone who had lived among them. "We must move, now." The authority in Makya's voice brooked no argument. "Leave everything that slows us down." As they hastily prepared to depart, Stefanie approached him. "Let me go to them," she said urgently. "I can buy you time. Convince them to turn back." "No." Makya's response was immediate and final. "They will take you and still come after us." "You don't know that." "I know white soldiers." His eyes held the memory of old wounds. "They see only what they want to see. To them, you are victim. We are savages. Nothing you say will change this." Before she could argue further, shouts erupted from the eastern edge of the clearing. 2 scouts raced toward them, gesturing urgently behind them. "More soldiers! From the east!" Makya's face went still. "They have split their forces. They try to trap us between them." Panic flickered through the group. They were caught in a pincer movement, with soldiers closing in from 2 directions and rough terrain to the north and south. The elder spoke quickly to Makya in Apache. After a brief but intense exchange, Makya nodded grimly. "What is it?" Stefanie asked. "What's happening?" "We must separate," Makya explained, his voice controlled despite the urgency. "Families with children will go north into the high passes. Warriors will create diversion to the south." Understanding dawned. "A diversion? You mean you'll draw the soldiers away?" Her throat tightened. "That's too dangerous." "It is necessary." Makya's eyes held hers. "You go with my mother, to winter grounds." "No." Stefanie gripped his arm. "I stay with you." For a moment, conflict warred in Makya's face. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. "Stay close. Do exactly as I say." The tribe divided swiftly. Tearful goodbyes were exchanged as families headed north under the protection of a few warriors, while the main fighting force prepared to move south. Naltsai approached them, her face a mask of disapproval. "You should go with women," she told Stefanie sharply. "I can help," Stefanie insisted. "I know how soldiers think, and I know field medicine if anyone is hurt." The older woman's eyes narrowed, then shifted to her son. They exchanged a long look, some unspoken communication passing between them, before Naltsai finally nodded. "You are stubborn," she said to Stefanie, "like Apache woman." She pressed something into Stefanie's hand, a small pouch of medicinal herbs. "For wounds," she explained, then added in a lower voice, "Be strong for my son." With that, she turned away, joining the group heading north. Makya watched his mother go, emotion briefly crossing his face before he schooled his features back to warrior calm. "Come," he said to Stefanie. "We ride now." As the warriors mounted their few horses, Makya pulled Stefanie up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek against his back, drawing strength from his solidity. "Whatever happens," he said over his shoulder, "remember you are loved. By me. By my mother. You belong with us. No one can take that from you." Then they were racing south, toward danger, toward a confrontation Stefanie had feared since the first day she had chosen to stay with the Apache. The warriors rode hard, making no attempt at stealth now. Their goal was not to hide, but to be seen, to draw the soldiers away from the vulnerable families heading into the mountains. As they crested a ridge, they caught sight of the 1st Cavalry Unit, perhaps 20 men, moving cautiously along the valley floor. At a signal from their leader, the Apache warriors split into smaller groups, each taking a different direction. "What are they doing?" Stefanie asked, confused by the apparent lack of coordination. "Making soldiers chase many targets," Makya explained, guiding his horse down a treacherous slope. "They will not know which to follow. But won't that put your men at greater risk?" Apache warrior in mountains is never easy target. There was grim confidence in his voice. We lead soldiers on long chase, exhaust their horses, draw them far from our people. They rode for hours, alternately visible and invisible to their pursuers. Whenever the soldiers seemed to be giving up, the warriors would appear briefly on a ridge, taunting them into continued pursuit. By late afternoon, the cavalry horses were laboring, while the lighter burdened Apache mounts still moved with surprising energy. As dusk approached, Makya led them into a narrow canyon, a place where the walls rose steep on either side, and the trail narrowed to barely the width of a horse. "We rest here," he announced, dismounting and helping Stefanie down. "Soldiers cannot follow in darkness. These trails too dangerous." The warriors unsaddled their horses, rubbing them down with handfuls of grass. Small fires were deemed safe now, and soon the smell of coffee, a luxury obtained through trade, mingled with the smoke. Stefanie helped prepare a simple meal, her muscles aching from the long ride. As she worked, she overheard the warriors discussing their next move, splitting further, some heading west to lead the soldiers on a fruitless chase, others circling back to ensure the families reached the winter grounds safely. Makya joined her by their small fire, accepting a cup of coffee with a grateful nod. "You did well today," he said. "Not many white women could ride so long without complaint." "Not many white women have such motivation," she replied, settling beside him. "What happens tomorrow?" "We separate, make many trails. Soldiers cannot follow all." He sipped his coffee. "You and I will go to meet the others at winter grounds." Relief washed through her. "When will we—" A sharp crack echoed through the canyon, followed by a cry of pain. One of the warriors collapsed, blood blooming across his chest. "Ambush!" someone shouted, and chaos erupted. Gunfire erupted from above, soldiers positioned on the rim of the canyon, firing down at the trapped Apache. Horses screamed in terror, men shouted orders and warnings, and the deafening report of rifles bounced off the canyon walls. Makya dragged Stefanie behind a boulder, shielding her with his body. "Stay down," he ordered, his voice fierce with protective anger. All around them, warriors scrambled for cover or fought to control panicked horses. Two more fell to the bullets raining from above. Through the confusion, Stefanie heard an authoritative voice call out, "Apache warriors, you are surrounded. Surrender, and you will not be harmed." She recognized Major Blackwood's voice, amplified by the canyon walls. "We have only come for the white woman," he continued. "Release her and you may go free." Makya's body tensed against hers. "Lies," he hissed. "Always lies." Stefanie knew he was right. The army had no intention of letting these warriors go free. This was the excuse they had been waiting for, to eliminate a band of hostiles and recover a white woman in one operation. "Let me talk to them," she urged. "I can tell them I'm here willingly. Maybe—" "No." Makya's eyes blazed in the firelight. "They shoot anyone who moves." As if to prove his point, another warrior who had tried to reach better cover cried out and fell, clutching his leg. Trapped and outnumbered, the Apache began returning fire, their few rifles answering the soldiers' barrage. But their position was hopeless, caught in a narrow canyon with enemies controlling the high ground. "We need to get out of here," Stefanie said desperately. "Is there another way?" Makya's eyes scanned the darkness. One path, dangerous. At far end of canyon, he pointed to a barely visible trail that switchbacked up the steep wall. "If we reach it—" Her bullet splintered rock inches from their heads, showering them with fragments. Makya pulled Stefanie closer, protecting her from the debris. "Listen," he said urgently. "When I say run, you go to that trail. Do not stop. Do not look back." "Not without you," she protested. "I will be behind you." His hand cupped her face. "Trust me." Makya signaled to the surviving warriors, communicating a plan through hand gestures. They nodded grimly, understanding what was being asked of them. "Now!" Makya suddenly shouted, and several warriors broke cover simultaneously, firing rapidly at the canyon rim, forcing the soldiers to duck. In that moment of distraction, Makya pushed Stefanie forward. "Run!" She ran, heart pounding, expecting each second to feel the impact of a bullet. Behind her she could hear Makya following, his footsteps steady despite the danger. They had covered half the distance to the trail when a new volley of gunfire erupted. Stefanie heard Makya grunt in pain, followed by the sound of him stumbling. She turned to see him on one knee, blood darkening his shirt along his side. "Go," he ordered, struggling to his feet. Instead, she ran back to him, ducking under his arm to support him. "Together," she insisted. With her help, they continued toward the trail, now moving more slowly. Bullets kicked up dust around their feet, but the darkness and the soldiers' elevated position worked in their favor, making accurate shooting difficult. They reached the base of the trail just as a flare illuminated the canyon in harsh white light. Exposed, they heard a shout from above. They had been spotted. "Climb," Makya urged, pushing her toward the narrow path. "I am behind you." The trail was little more than a goat path, winding precariously up the canyon wall. Stefanie climbed as quickly as she dared, feeling Makya's labored breathing close behind her. Halfway up, she heard him stumble again. Turning, she saw him leaning heavily against the rock face, his face pale with pain and blood loss. "Leave me," he gasped. "Save yourself." Stefanie felt a surge of anger. "Don't you dare give up on me, Makya. We go together or not at all." Something like pride flickered in his eyes. He nodded once, gathering his strength. With Stefanie supporting him, they continued their painful ascent. Each step seemed to take an eternity, the sounds of battle below growing more desperate as the remaining warriors fought to give them time to escape. Finally, they reached the top of the canyon and collapsed behind a cluster of boulders. Stefanie immediately turned her attention to Makya's wound, tearing strips from her dress to bind it tightly. "The bullet passed through," she said with relief, working quickly in the darkness. "But you've lost blood." Makya touched her face, leaving a smear of dirt and blood. "You are a brave woman, Stefanie Moss." "I'm a terrified woman who refuses to lose the only home she's ever found," she corrected, helping him to his feet. "Can you walk?" He nodded grimly. "We must reach horses." Before they had left the camp, warriors had hidden several horses in a box canyon nearby, insurance against just such a disaster. If they could reach them, they might still escape. They moved as quickly as Makya's injury allowed, following game trails through the darkness. Twice they had to freeze and hide as search parties passed nearby, soldiers with lanterns calling to each other as they combed the area. By dawn, they had reached the hidden horses. Makya was alarmingly pale but still moving under his own power. They mounted, Makya gritting his teeth against the pain, and rode north, toward the winter grounds where, hopefully, the rest of the tribe had safely gathered. They traveled cautiously, staying off main trails and using every trick of concealment Makya knew. By midday, they had put significant distance between themselves and the soldiers, but Makya's condition was worsening. His wound had reopened, and fever had set in. In a sheltered grove beside a small stream, Stefanie insisted they stop. "You need rest," she said firmly. "And I need to clean your wound properly." Too weak to argue, Makya allowed her to help him dismount and settle against a tree. Stefanie worked quickly, using the medicinal herbs Naltsai had given her to make a poultice for the wound. "This will help fight the infection," she explained, applying the mixture carefully. "But you need to rest." Makya watched her with fever-bright eyes. "You have become a Apache woman," he observed, his voice weaker than before, strong, skilled. "I had good teachers." She helped him drink from the water skin. "Rest now. We'll move again when you're stronger." As Makya drifted into uneasy sleep, Stefanie kept watch, alert for any sign of pursuit. The horses grazed quietly nearby, as exhausted as their riders. She found herself thinking of the journey that had brought her here, from unwanted orphan to laundress, to reluctant wagon train passenger. How strange that a brutal attack, which should have been the end of her story, had instead been its true beginning. With Makya and his people, she had found what had eluded her all her life: acceptance, purpose, belonging, love, not despite her differences, but with full acknowledgement of them. Makya stirred, murmuring in his fever dream. Stefanie dampened a cloth and bathed his face gently. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." They remained hidden for 2 days, Makya's condition gradually improving thanks to Stefanie's care and Naltsai's medicines. By the 3rd morning his fever had broken, and though weak he was clear-eyed and determined to continue their journey. "The soldiers will not have given up," he warned, as Stefanie helped him mount. "We must reach winter grounds before first snow." They traveled slowly but steadily, following paths only the Apache knew, moving higher into the mountains where cavalry horses could not easily follow. The air grew colder, the pine forests denser. On the fifth day, as they crested a high pass, Makya suddenly reined in his horse. "Look," he said, pointing to a distant valley nestled between protective peaks. Smoke rose from several locations. Cook fires, barely visible against the backdrop of forested slopes. "The winter grounds," Stefanie breathed. "They made it." Makya's hand found hers. "We made it," he corrected. As they descended toward the valley, figures appeared on the trail ahead. Apache scouts, weapons ready. Upon recognizing Makya, they broke into shouts of welcome and relief. Word spread quickly. By the time they reached the center of the camp, the entire tribe had gathered. Naltsai pushed through the crowd, her stoic facade cracking at the sight of her wounded son. "Foolish boy," she muttered, helping him dismount. "Always fighting." But her hands were gentle as she examined his partially healed wound, and her eyes, when they met Stefanie's, held grudging approval. "You kept him alive," she acknowledged. "Good medicine." It was the highest praise Stefanie had ever received from the formidable woman. As Naltsai led Makya away to rest, the elders gathered around Stefanie, eager for news of the other warriors. She told them everything, the ambush, the fighting, how Makya had been wounded covering their escape. "And the others?" one elder asked gravely. Stefanie could only shake her head. "I don't know. We were separated in the confusion." A somber mood settled over the camp. Prayers were offered for the missing warriors, and watches were posted on all approaches to the valley. That night, as Stefanie sat beside Makya's sleeping form in Naltsai's wickiup, the older woman joined her. "You love my son," Naltsai said. It wasn't a question. Yes. There was no hesitation in Stefanie's answer. Even knowing the danger, what it means to be with Apache man. Stefanie met the older woman's gaze steadily. "I know what it means to be alone, to belong nowhere and to no one, and I know what it means to belong with Makya, with all of you." She gestured to the camp beyond the wickiup walls. "I choose this. Every day, I choose this." Naltsai studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then you are Apache now, my daughter." The simple words, spoken with quiet certainty, filled Stefanie's eyes with tears. Naltsai reached out, her weathered hand covering Stefanie's, and for the first time there was no barrier between them, only the shared love for the man sleeping nearby. Over the following weeks, as winter tightened its grip on the mountains, more warriors trickled into the camp, survivors of the canyon ambush who had scattered and hidden before making their way to the winter grounds. Each arrival was cause for celebration, though many faces would never be seen again. Makya recovered his strength and with it, his determination. "We will survive this winter," he vowed, "and in spring we will find new hunting grounds, farther from soldiers." "They'll never stop looking for me, will they?" Stefanie asked quietly. "Not while they believe you are captive." His eyes held hers. "But we will be far away by then, where they cannot find us." As the first snow blanketed the valley, Stefanie and Makya were joined in marriage according to Apache tradition. The ceremony was simple but profound, vows exchanged before the tribe, promises made to honor and protect each other through all seasons. Naltsai presented Stefanie with a wedding gift, a necklace of turquoise and silver that had belonged to her own mother. "For my daughter," she said, fastening it around Stefanie's neck, who came from far away to find her home. That night, in the privacy of the wickiup that was now theirs, Makya held Stefanie close as the winter wind sang outside. "Are you happy?" he asked, his fingers tracing the line of her cheek. Stefanie looked into the eyes of the man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved, from death, from loneliness, from a life without purpose or belonging. "I'm home," she answered simply. "I'm finally home." Spring came late to the high country, the snow lingering in shadowed places, even as wildflowers began to dot the meadows. The tribe prepared to move on, seeking new territories away from the ever-encroaching settlers and soldiers. On the morning of their departure, Stefanie stood on a ridge overlooking the valley that had sheltered them through the winter. Her hand rested on her belly, where new life had begun to grow, a child of two worlds who would know from birth what it meant to belong. Makya joined her, his arm slipping around her waist. "Having second thoughts?" he asked. Stefanie shook her head. "No. Just saying goodbye to this place, thanking it for keeping us safe. He nodded, understanding. There will be other safe places. We will find them together. Together, she agreed, turning to face him fully. That's all that matters. As they descended to join the waiting tribe, Stefanie thought of the frightened, lonely woman she had been less than a year ago. The woman who had cried in despair, "I don't belong anywhere." How wrong she had been. All along she had been journeying toward this, toward the man who had looked into her soul and said with absolute certainty, "You belong with me." And in finding him, in finding his people, in becoming one of them, Stefanie Moss had finally found herself. The end. Dear listener, in the quiet moments after this story settles in your heart, remember that you, like Stefanie, have a place where you truly belong. Perhaps you haven't found it yet, or perhaps you're already there, surrounded by those who see you not for who they wish you to be, but for who you truly are. The deserts we cross in life, those lonely stretches where we feel abandoned, misunderstood, or rejected, are not our final destination. They are merely the necessary journey toward the mountains where our real home awaits. The people who cannot accept you for who you are were never meant to be your people. Your tribe exists, even if you haven't met them yet. And should you ever hear that whisper in your heart saying, "I don't belong anywhere," remember that somewhere, someone is waiting to answer, "You belong with me." It may be a lover, a friend, a community, or even a purpose that calls to your soul. But that belonging exists for you, as surely as the sun will rise tomorrow. Rest peacefully tonight. The journey continues tomorrow, and you have everything you need to face it. With love and gratitude, Wild West Whispers. If this story touched your heart, please support our channel by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting below. Your presence here means the world to us. It's what inspires us to keep telling stories filled with love, courage, and the belief that everyone deserves a place to belong. From the desert winds to the mountain skies, thank you for journeying with Stefanie and Makya. Another powerful story awaits you at the end of this video. Click and discover more unforgettable tales.